Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Science of Fitness podcast. Today we have Dr. Priyanka Naidoo. Pri, welcome aboard.
Thank you very much for having me.
No problems, and thanks for jumping on. So there's a whole heap to get stuck into today. Your work with Dala and the Meddlesome team around tech and I guess mental health, mental wellness in the tech space. You've done a PhD in psychology and more social psych, so plenty to discuss there. But to kick things off, I'd really like to just start with your story and your journey. And for me, it's such an important piece of, someone's profession and personal identity and I guess where they are in their career. What really got you going first and foremost into psychology? Talk me through high school and your experiences and then what led you to at least doing an undergrad in psych.
Yeah. So with psychology, it was funny because it wasn't something initially I was very drawn to. It was almost, I couldn't see myself, doing other things. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll try psychology and see what happens as a starting point. And it was only until about third year, I think, I really got into it and I could see how I could personally benefit from it. So, it wasn't just about, the grades and all that. It was, wow, this is really valuable. I can apply this to myself and I want to share this with others. So I've grown up with social anxiety. It has, been, I think, a big part of my story about why I do the work that I do and, how I want to support others. And it's, something that I think a lot of people can relate to. And, even if you don't have social anxiety, you can definitely relate to feeling like an outsider or wanting to belong or, that kind of need is so innate in us. And having that as, something that's really held me back in a lot of situations, things that I wanted to pursue in my work life, maybe in social life as well, and having to then navigate and apply what I was learning and also what I was teaching. I was teaching these things at university and looking at myself going, wait, I'm talking about anxiety, I'm talking about low confidence and how to build it, yet I'm struggling. So really looking at how, I can use those evidence-based tools on myself and share that journey with others. It's really important.
You talk about growing up and struggling to an extent with social anxiety. When did you realize that you were? Like, were there multiple moments that you experienced and hated and, struggled with and had to deal with, as we all do? At what point were you able to look over your shoulder and go, I was really struggling with that then?
So I think it was only when I was studying psychology that I realized like there was a name for it, that it was social anxiety. I think I always just thought, this is okay. Like I'm just a shy kid. This is just who I am.
And so what are the feelings?
Sometimes it's that kind of fight or flight, that it can look different. So sometimes it's that your heart is racing, you're shaking, you start perspiring, and sometimes even it makes you feel like you're frozen, like you cannot speak. You want to speak up, but you can't. And like I remember my dad telling me that one of his friends thought I was mute because of how little I spoke when I was young, because I was terrified that I would say something silly or say something embarrassing and, I'd be rejected, like rejected from the tribe, we know is so important in terms of that kind of fight or flight
and sort of
evolutionary response.
Driving the behavior or driving the feeling that drives the behavior and so it sort of goes. Because that's what I was going to ask is like experientially. And the reason I'm doing this is I've no doubt there's so many people that are listening to this haven't been able to or haven't had the opportunity to a degree, the luxury of being able to go, oh, that is something that I'm experiencing. It's not who I am. And I think that's the most important thing for people to understand is like, your dad saying, people think you're a mute. It's like, that's not going to help. And probably well intended in saying that. But learning that about yourself is such a valuable thing.
Yeah, and I think also that, when you're labeled a shy kid, you think that that's then who you are and that you can't change. And so for the longest time, I thought people were either confident or they're not, and I didn't think about it as a skill that you could develop. And I think that's so then limiting, right? If you just label yourself or put yourself in a box, I'm just this way. And so it took me, honestly, even after undergrad studying psychology, it was when I was teaching a course on performance psychology, also sports psychology, it was, realizing that our ability to build confidence, emotion regulation, our ability to, manage stress, these are all skills that we can work on and build over time and strengthen. And I think that was sort of a game changer for me, realizing I could, work on this.
So powerful. I love it. I say it from an exercise science movement sense. Someone comes in with pain or, wanting to improve their movement in any way, shape or form. First and foremost, it's a skill. And in our world, we call it a neurological adaptation. Your ability to recruit the muscle or execute the movement pattern is a bit clunky when you start and you're a bit bad and you got to practice to get good. It's same psychologically, right? As you said, confidence being a skill. What were things that you did in terms of implementing reps and sets to go, that's a moment where I lack confidence. How do I build it? Because it'd be nice if we could go, I'm a confident person and turn around and be confident, but it doesn't work like that. So from the, I guess, the psych literature sense, and then obviously in your experience, what did you do to gradually build that confidence?
Yeah. So for me, because I think for a long time, I would actually avoid things that I was quite anxious about. And we know that avoidance doesn't help anything, because if you avoid something that you feel anxious about, then you feel so much better, like you feel this release. And that then teaches you to avoid those situations again and again.
Reinforces it.
Exactly. And so for me, something that I knew I really wanted to do was tutoring at the university. I love teaching. I love presenting. It is something that completely terrifies me, but
You're
I
called
can't
to
say
do
no.
it.
Yeah, so I actually, so I think I taught over maybe 4 years. In my third year, I actually developed chronic insomnia. I wasn't sleeping at all. I was really stressed.
As a tutor.
As a tutor, because I was
At
teaching.
university.
Yeah.
And this is post-undergrad.
This is, yes, post-undergrad. So while I was doing my PhD.
Wow.
And that, I remember talking to my parents because I was really, really struggling one semester. And to the point where I couldn't eat properly. I was trying to have toast and honey, and I was having, the GP gave me these multivitamins, and it was really difficult. And at some point my parents would drop me to university to teach and said that I don't want you driving, because I was just so, I felt so, weak, and it was a horrible time. And so, there were conversations about, do you want to continue teaching? And I knew that this is something that I wanted to do, and that over time it would tell my brain and body that actually this is okay, that this is safe. And I'm so glad I stuck through it, because I get to continue to do the work that I love. And I also got evidence that, as a tutor or lecturer, you get these evaluations from your students. And one of the most powerful ones was, during the semester that I wasn't sleeping, because I got evidence that actually you're doing okay. Actually, there are people out here that think of you in such, high regard, despite you weren't, you're sleeping, you're not, your poor sleep and things like that. And so I think it's over time building up that evidence and reminding yourself of that. There are still times now. I had a presentation on Tuesday, terrified. And when you're terrified and it's like you've got tunnel vision, and all you can think about is, oh my gosh, I'm going to fail. Oh my gosh, I'm going to embarrass myself. All of these things. And I called up a friend, and she had to remind me, hey, Pri, this is like child's play for you. You're only talking for, this amount of time. You've done this and this. And I almost forgot.
Yeah.
So it was like, you have the evidence, but sometimes you need to remind yourself. And it's also, I think, about understanding more about, wellbeing tools out there and your own psychology, and practicing them, having these daily habits or routines that you can fall back on, or that you can, build to kind of strengthen that resilience and that confidence that we all want.
Yeah, absolutely. I sort of reflect on my story, and public speaking was something that I have not had an issue with my entire life. One, and I've said it on this podcast before, I grew up in a family of 4 other kids, we were fighting for attention at the dinner table. And if you had the spotlight on you, you had the mic, you're telling a bloody good story and it's compelling and you're trying to hold the crowd because you're going to lose them really quickly. So that was a great initial skill development. I think one of the first speeches I gave in like an English class, I got a really good mark for it. I then did an inter-schools public speaking competition and did really well, and had to then say in front of the school as a year 3 kid to all the year 7s and 6s, and had all these positive experiences. There were a few negative ones in there. I did some like impromptu public speaking ones and stood up with one line as a 10-year-old in front of dads and kids at this inter-school thing and had nothing to say and went white and nearly vomited. So, there were challenges with it for myself, but I had positive reinforcement all the time. And now like this stuff, I love it. And the more I get put in front of people speaking, the better I am at it. And I look at that positive reinforcement versus your case, maybe other end of the spectrum. Maybe you didn't get good grades or whatever the association you might have had that caused you to have this visceral neural reaction. It's funny how we can be a subject of that. Yeah. And I think how so many people go through their lives subjects of that and not realizing it.
Yeah, I think also something that I've realized is that, sometimes if something bad happens, there are some people who internalize that. So I think that's something that I'll do, or I did while growing up for sure, is if someone was rude to me or they acted in a way that was disrespectful, I saw that as I'm not worthy of respect. I really saw that as something that was a failure on my part. Whereas now, when you when you're older, you can kind of see, no, actually, there are just some shitty people out there, and it's on them. And so I think that learning to do that as well, learning to not, take things personally or internalize all of these experiences has also been really important. And also, I mentioned before about that evidence that, you're doing okay despite your fears, and being able to challenge those kind of unhelpful thoughts is really, really important. But actually equally as important has been the times when maybe I've presented and I was like, actually, that wasn't great. But do you know what? It was fine. Nothing bad happened to me. Maybe I completely messed up, but what? Like no one, I'm safe. I'm good. Yeah. I'm just going to try again and it'll be okay.
It'll be okay. And people aren't talking about it again. And no one's worrying about it. And whatever's in your head is not nearly as bad as it seems.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's such a good point. And I find particularly when we're navigating new people in here, the biggest question we get is, the biggest roadblock resistance is, what will they think? I'm worried about what they think. And it's like, they're worried about what you think. And so you're both worried about the same thing. And so it's the most ridiculous thing to worry about because everybody thinks the other person's watching them, which is the silliest thing, but it's so true. And it speaks the same to, this situation as you're saying, as you're giving that presentation, someone's worried that you're watching them not pay attention and then they'll manifest that and stress about it or whatever it might be. And it just shows, I guess, the vulnerability and the fragility of the conscious mind. Which sort of is to a degree where psychology comes in, and we're getting much, much clearer understanding as it evolves, neurologically and psychologically as it goes. And so you did your undergrad and you did your research in social psych.
I did, yes.
And what took you down there? How did that come about?
I think I was just always really interested in understanding why people or how people think the way that they do. So when presented with evidence, why do people, for example, my thesis was looking at climate change attitudes and perceptions of risk. And, when people are presented with information, and evidence, people will deny that and dismiss that. And I was very interested in why and how, we can look for evidence or search for things that actually confirm our expectations or our existing kind of, worldviews and all of that. And I don't know, I found that really fascinating with even with science communication now. And there are so many, there are scientists out there who have spent their entire, career working on something. And, people who don't have that exact same kind of knowledge can dismiss the evidence without properly looking into it or reading further. And I wanted to understand why, and I mean, just because you have a PhD or a scientist in something doesn't mean you know everything, of course. But I wanted to just understand that and explore it a little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Really interesting. What were, I guess, to preface this question, one of the big things from building that confidence that you now have in abundance, by the way, is there's a degree of hard work that goes into it. There's a degree of, I've earned this stripe. And I think a PhD is incredibly challenging, and a lot of people forget until you live or work with someone that's doing a PhD and you go, oh, you're doing a PhD, that's hard. And there's a degree of, I guess, the delayed self-gratification of a PhD where you submit something and it comes back and you get ridiculed and you got to go do it again and you got to work hard and then your data has to be right and everything else. What were the big challenges that ultimately gave you the stripe or the confidence element from a researcher perspective and now as a professional?
Yeah, I think personally for me, it was one of the best experiences because it was, it showed me evidence that I can do hard things, and I think everyone who does a PhD we all have, unique challenges, and we're also doing other things, we're working, we're teaching, we're doing research assistant work. There are so many things that we're doing. And imposter syndrome amongst, my colleagues, my friends doing the PhD is just everywhere. And so I think that was a big part of it is, trying to combat that kind of voice that comes in that you can't do this. Who are you to, because you're also, when you do a research paper and you publish to a journal, there are a board of, like your peers or people that are experts in that area. And they're evaluating or they're looking at your research and saying whether it should be in this journal or not. And that can also feel like a sense of rejection because there is a lot of rejection in academia. There is a lot. Yeah. And so also navigating that and kind of normalizing that experience, I think was important, and I think that's kind of goes with most of life challenges is like. That's
what my next question was.
Yeah.
It's not a personal attack. It's an objective. The journal has a certain standard and we have to meet it.
Exactly. Yes. And I think that was something that happened, during our PhD is separating my work from myself. I definitely for the longest time, and probably still do it to some extent, is that, anything that is important to you, it might be an idea, a value, a project. If it gets criticized, if it feels like it's rejected, it feels like you're getting criticized or rejected. And so being able to separate the two has been so important. You aren't your work. You aren't what you produce. You are so much more than that.
That's really interesting. How do people that are hearing this concept for the first time actually separate it? Because it's all well and good to hear this and think that of yourself, but what are some hard to do, like sit down tools, write it in a journal, chat to a friend? Like, is there specific stuff that sort of comes to mind?
Yeah, definitely. So, if you can, seeing a mental health practitioner, a psychologist, I think is such a powerful tool. I know it's not accessible for everyone, the wait times, that would be the first thing. But also something that's been really powerful for me is journaling. And it's being able to write how you're feeling, but with some distance. And I think, you can talk it out, you can type it, that still helps. But there's something with writing where, because your brain, like you write slower than your brain kind of. Yeah, exactly. And so I think that helps you slow down the thoughts, and especially if you're feeling really anxious or angry or some overwhelming emotions, that is so helpful. But it allows you to kind of see what you've written on paper and see that with a bit of distance. So it's not like I'm feeling this anger, but I can see that I'm noticing that I'm feeling that anger, and you can see, patterns in that over time as well. For me, it has been a life changer, like if I'm upset or if I'm feeling anxious, writing it down and looking at and challenging my thoughts as well, looking for evidence that actually this isn't true. Like thoughts are just thoughts. They are not facts.
Yeah.
You know? And it's over time seeing that. So, you know, even talking to a friend, of course, you know, talking to someone that you, is very, really helpful. If you've got that tunnel vision and you can't see anything else but, you know, your emotions, you know, getting on the phone with someone, can be really helpful.
Yeah. I've seen a beautiful graphic on the wonderful place that is the internet, of, you know, our thoughts are just scribbles of circle just in all sorts of patterns in one page, and then our thoughts in conversation are these scribbles, but this sort of line that flows quite beautifully, and then a journal, our thoughts on paper, are a beautiful, wavy, organized line, because you cannot scramble. You cannot just, you have to, as you say, no, come back, finish that sentence completely, write it out, make it literate.
Yeah, and it helps you process your emotions and identify what it is you're feeling. Because I think sometimes we don't actually know. Like it takes us a while to, like I think I'm pretty good at identifying what that specific emotion is. But for a lot of us, it's actually quite hard. You know, it might feel like, you know, a tightness in our chest, or it might feel like a warmth in our, you know, in our body, but we don't know what exactly it is. And so being able to process it in that way is so helpful to then know what to do kind of next, to then, you know, manage it.
How has it shaped the way you now approach your work professionally, the PhD particularly? It's evidence you can do hard things. It's a really, really, you know, it's a challenging, but I suppose that sense of accomplishment is really strong in it. What did you pick up from a skill set perspective that you've now taken over into your professional career?
I think also like the research base, you know, we want, you know, so I'm product lead and wellbeing designer for Dala Health, and we want it to, you know, be based in research, be rooted in science. You know, we want it to be practical and evidence-based, so that when people are feeling a certain way, we can suggest and encourage them tools that actually, you know, help. So that research base is really strong within us in our process.
Sorry to interrupt. How important do you think that is now in the modern world? Because there is so much noise.
Yeah.
And a lot of the noise, when it comes to hard evidence and literature, is not particularly that qualified.
Yeah. It is really difficult because, you know, even someone who has a research background, you know, you listen to some podcasts and you go, oh, that sounds pretty, you know, valid, and they sound like they know what they're talking about. And then you look into it and you go, oh, okay, I can't actually find evidence of this. And it is really, really difficult. Like, I think it's, you know, really doing the reading, looking at the claims that are being made and what are the studies that are behind it. You know, like I'm quite interested in that area of, mis and disinformation, and looking at kind of that critical thinking piece, and that also different types of evidence. You know, there's a hierarchy of evidence. There is anecdotal evidence, which
is the little story.
Exactly, which is also, you know, can be biased and it might be a small sample. Or there's, you know, the kind of, you know, you kind of go up in the ladder of
talk us through as many as you can pull.
Yeah, so there's, you know, research articles as experimental kind of data. So where you're doing an experiment and you're looking at, you know, randomized control trial will be looking at a control group versus an experimental group. So if I want to test a drug, for example, and see whether it reduces anxiety, I will have a look at, you know, does that reduce anxiety? But I'll also have a placebo or a control group. So they're still having a supplement or, you know, a pill.
I think it might work.
Exactly. And looking at the differences, because we know the placebo effect is so powerful and strong. Like the mind is very, very strong. And also, you know, we have meta-analyses, which actually looks at a whole body of research and looks at what is the evidence with that. So that's the, you know, top tier kind of form. Yep. And so some people, when you're talking about, you know, a supplement or different, you know, whatever it is, they might be citing research that's done only in animals, for example, you know, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not helpful for humans, but that research just isn't out yet.
It's not there. We can't be conclusive.
Exactly. And so, you know, there is some research that, you know, we might be able to say there is some, you know,
emerging evidence.
Yeah, exactly, of this. And that's the thing with science. I think we like things to be clear cut. Does it work, doesn't it? And science isn't like that.
We're not there.
Because it's not like also that we're all the same and that everything, works for,
Mass populations,
exactly.
yeah.
And so looking at what is that, what is the population that they've been testing on? Have they looked at females as well? Have they looked at different age groups, people with different hormonal imbalances? Like there are so many things that is needed to be able to say, with a lot of, like a strong confidence that this is true or this is exactly. And so I think it is hard. And I think, having a research background, it's still quite difficult to know. And so that's something that, with Darla, we want to ensure that the research is out there before, we create these resources. And, after creating the app, we want to look at its impact on anxiety and depression and ensure, that it is, effective.
Effective and valid. Let's get into Darla. Let's get into the work that you guys are really doing there. So, high-level summary, holistic mental health, healthcare.
Yes.
What happens with Darla?
Yes.
What does it look like?
So Darla is an app and it allows you to process your emotions and provides you insights on how you're doing and also suggests tools, evidence-based tools to support you where you're at. So, if you're feeling quite happy, you're feeling pretty good, you might be suggested to, learn a bit more about how you can prolong those feelings. You might do, a great meditation, things like that. If you're feeling quite anxious, you might learn a little bit more about what anxiousness is, where it stems from, but then also be suggested a number of strategies like, thought challenging, or there are so many kind of CBT kind of techniques like worry time and, all these evidence-based things that you'll be suggested. So we want to create something that's super personalized and that will be helpful for you, depending on like what you're going through at that time. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. It's sort of, and I've had the fortunate, I guess, experience of being able to interact with it and use it and do some work with you guys. And from an actual product design perspective, the way it feels and the utilization, it doesn't have this sort of tech, they're collecting data and they're going to find out about me. It really does have that supportive mechanism. How important is that? And I guess whether we like it or not, tech is a part of our lives, big time. And it's only going to increase tenfold in the next couple of years. How important is that for people to, I guess, have that understanding and appreciation of the value that tech can bring? Because it gets criticized everywhere. But in this case, it can be incredibly valuable for people.
Exactly. It just enhances support for us, and I'll be honest, when it was suggested that Darla uses AI, I was a bit like, it's almost like my education and my teaching in psychology teaches me not to trust, AI in a way. It's like, no, this is not right. But then when you see it, and see how it works and how we can't create a product that supports and is as personalized without it. And being able to, say how you're feeling, say you've had a really hard day, you're feeling this way, and it can process that for you and suggest very quickly then some things that you can do to support yourself.
And it doesn't come with the emotional baggage of admitting those feelings to a friend or a partner or a work colleague.
Exactly.
Where you might resist sharing that.
Exactly.
Because of what you might get back.
Yeah, it feels like a kind of, I think, safe space for you to explore your feelings without that fear of judgment, because I think for a lot of people, it might be, you might not be wanting to kind of reach out to a friend. You might not know how to express what you're feeling or, and so being able to talk to the AI and talk to Darla is so beneficial. It might be even kind of the first, kind of thing that you do before you reach out for help and you've kind of processed what you're doing. You're okay. Actually, that wasn't that hard. I can reach out. And so I think it's really powerful. But also, when we're experiencing challenges, sometimes when we're stuck in it, we can't see what to do next. It's like when a friend comes to you for advice, you can tell them what to do. You can give great advice. You're like, oh my gosh, I was so wise, But when you're in that situation, you're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do, And so to be able to tell Darla how you feel and then suggest something that will help you, I think is really incredibly valuable. You know, you don't have to look at, what resource do I want to look at? What, you know, it will suggest you something to do at in the moment.
And then how important is the momentum aspect in that case? You go and take action on, you feel stuck, make a suggestion, it comes through, you follow through with it. It builds momentum in a positive way, right?
Definitely. And I think that's the thing is that, you know, when you start to practice this and build this kind of toolkit, I think it's all about, you know, we all have this toolkit and we have, you know, things like connecting with loved ones, journaling, you know, cuddling our pets or, you know, whatever it is. We have all these tools, but sometimes we don't know how to use it or when to use it. And it's just about that practicing, and you'll come to realize, okay, actually when I'm feeling quite angry, when I'm in a heated conversation, these are the tools I can draw on. When I'm feeling really anxious, there might be some different tools that I draw on, you know? So it's trying to kind of make well-being a daily practice, because I think, you know, preventative healthcare and preventative, you know, emotional support and is something that we can, you know, do a lot better in.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the space that we want to be in, is how can we prevent things, you know, like burnout down the track or those stressful periods? How can we build those skills and
to
support
handle them?
Exactly.
And as you said, you know, preventative mechanisms being the best. And it's very easy to sit and ask for help, to sit and journal, to, in this, you know, look to book an appointment with a psychologist when you're doing not so great, when you're doing badly, when you're not feeling your best. Accessibility is a big factor. You guys are probably going to be addressing that with Dala, to be able to implement things when you're doing well and say, hey, I'm actually feeling really good. There's a mechanism within the app that sort of works in that sense.
Yes. So that was something that we spoke about, being actually it might not be when someone's struggling that they want to try out a new behavior, you know, a new habit. It might actually be when they're doing well. So how can we encourage people to start, you know, building these new habits when they're doing well? So when they're not, you know, they've got something to fall back on. Exactly. And I think that's really powerful, because, you know, we know that, like, if we're stressed, then we might stop exercising as much. You know, we're not sleeping well. We might be choosing, you know, fast foods and ordering Uber Eats more because we don't have the energy to, you know, to cook healthy meals. And so, but if it's part of our routine, if we have this community with us as well, we enjoy seeing the people, you know, that we exercise with and things like that you've built here, you know, we are more likely to rely on that when we are, you know, going through a hard time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's sort of the other component of what you guys are building, is to then be able to utilize this, what seems like an isolated sort of tech tool instrument, but then leveraging off the back of that to connect communities in that sense. So talk me through that strategy. I'm somewhat familiar with it.
Yeah, definitely. I think, community is a big aspect to Dala. You know, we know that when other, you know, our friends and our community are engaging in some kind of healthy behavior, like, it's contagious. We are more likely to try it as well. So, you know, our sort of next feature is all about insights. Like, how can we get personal insights, but also community insights to encourage behavior? So it might be that, you know, you think, I'm not going to journal. I'm not going to, like, you know, I think there's a little bit of a stigma, you know, with journaling. But actually, this community or this group of people that I actually identify with, maybe it's the same kind of age range, or, you know, maybe it's new parents, or, you know, whatever group. And actually people are saying that they are really enjoying journaling and it's helping them with their anxiousness. Or it might be a gratitude practice or something that you'd never even thought of doing, but actually it's normalized for you now because you see, you know, your community doing it as well.
Yeah.
And so how can we utilize that, those social norms, that encouragement from other people to encourage behaviors? Because that's why, like, group fitness and all of that is so powerful, right? Because you're doing it with others. Yeah.
It's funny. I mean, leaning back on the social scientist, you know, how much does that influence behaviors? You just sort of touched on that. When the people you're surrounded by are doing X, you're probably going to join them.
Yeah, it's a huge influence because you can see that, okay, that person can do it. It means I can do it. And also it's normalized for you. And that's why also, like, you know, with anything, you know, if you want to read more books, you know, the best way to do that is to join a reading club. Or if you want to exercise more, you join, you know, like an exercise, like a, you know,
A
small
gym
fitness group and
community,
things like that.
yeah.
Because you make, the behavior, when it's normalized, you're more likely to do it. And
Yeah.
we all have that need to belong, and it's very innate in us. And so, yeah, it's something that
how
we're
it evolves.
looking at. Yeah.
Anecdotal experiment is this place. It's the breathing class being the prime example. Young, fit, healthy, train hard. The more I learned, I was like, we need to bring in some sort of down-regulatory thing. And off we went with yoga, like the whole work, but particularly the breathing, and a breathing class that wasn't, I'm going to get a yoga-based breathing instructor that isn't relatable. I was like, I'm just going to learn, structure something, and let's see how we go. And now it's one of our most popular sessions, and it's wild because it is the one session that gets all walks of ability from a fitness sense engaged. But as you said, I train with her and she goes to breathing regularly, but she's also one of the fittest here, or, you know, I find her aspirational in whatever way. I'm going to go. And it sort of drives that social behavior. I think, as you said, seeing other people doing that you might regard as one, aspirational, or two, same as you. Well, I can go and do that behavior too.
Exactly. It's like running clubs. They're so popular now, you
They're
know.
huge,
You
yeah.
might think of yourself like, oh, I can't run, I can't, you know, but my friend's actually going, okay, yeah, I can do that. I could probably start out walking, and then, you know, it goes
I can
from
run
there.
faster than her. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Like,
Yeah.
so it's really powerful, and that's why, you know, we've started to do community events as well. Like, we are still building the app. We do have a beta version, and we're building it, and we want to build it with community because we know that, you know, mental health and well-being, it's so personalized. You know, even if we experience the same thing, we might experience it very differently.
Yeah.
And so what we need is different. And so, you know, it can't be something that just a small group of people, you know, look at and go, how can we design this? We want to hear from everyone. I think that's something that at Darla we've done really intentionally and quite well, is that we've, you know, tested every feature. We tested, and how can we learn from others. And so, like, for example, we were looking at how people process emotions. You know, one way, like I said before, I'm very good at identifying how I feel with language, but not everyone is. And so, you know, we had a great conversation with our team, and everyone sort of explored different ways. Is it, you know, now we have a journaling way where you can talk, because some people like talking out their feelings. Some people like, you know, typing. Can we do something down the track where we're kind of drawing where on the body we feel? You know, so it's like, how can we really personalize it so that no matter what your needs are, we can support you, you know, the best way possible.
Yeah. And there's sort of two layers with that. But the first one I want to go to is, as tech evolves, we're kind of doing this grand loop in the sense of, before social media and tech, all we had was the radius of people around us at work, home, sport, exercise, whatever communities we're a part of. And we didn't have access to the globe. Along comes the internet and this whole social media thing. We have access to, you know, 10x, 20x the volume of people we once thought we once were limited to. And in doing so, we're more connected than ever. But on an individual basis, isolation's gone up through the roof. Statistically, we're more isolated, connected but isolated. And I'm looking at tech now, and then I'm looking at all these behaviors, as you're saying, from a social norm, run clubs being the prime example in my world, my little bubble of exercise. Huge. And it's real. And it's sweaty. And it's not a filtered photo. And it's not the perfect caption. It's this, like, we're going to go and run, and it's early, and we're pulling sleep out of our eyes as we get there. And, you know, but the rawness of that experience is connecting people so much better. And, you know, and that's why it's taken off. It's not a fad. It's human behavior. You guys are the first, and you probably know more of. Do you think that that's where tech's going to go? We've almost realised we've isolated ourselves in an attempt to connect more.
Yeah.
And we're going to bring it full circle back?
I think definitely. I think we are really craving that connection. And I think also, you know, we had, in a lot of cultures, you would live with your extended family You know, you had this whole kind of, or you'd live very close to your neighbors and you knew, you know, the people on the street and you had all of that. But we don't have that as much anymore, and we don't have religion. I think that was another institution where, you know, you get together as a group and you practice gratitude. Like, what is prayer? It's gratitude and all of these kinds of things. And so we're looking at our, you know, our work, I think, and also, you know, gyms as kind of that outlet for us to feel like we belong, because when we feel like we belong and we're connected to others, like we feel safe. You know, it's so important.
That's very interesting. One of our over 50s clients, her husband's a professor in sociology, actually, and he made the observation of gyms are the modern day churches. You've got your over 50s, you've got your youth class, and then you've got everyone in between, and they come and practice ritualized things to a certain extent, and they connect and provides community. And I was like, it's a very, very interesting take. And it's such a good point, because all of that stuff, the very fabric that big community, society, cities build it, you know, success almost has been built on those foundations, and they've almost fallen out from underneath us. Unintentionally. I don't think there's one evil person going, I've worked this out. I think it's just a series of unintended circumstances. But here we are. And so we need to do something about it. Coincidentally for us, we stumbled into this exercise thing. Sweet. We will continue to endeavor to provide quality service from an exercise sense, and, you know, let that be settled on the backbone of community. And likewise for you guys, you know, support and help, but let that be supported through that really strong connection and community piece, because that drives adherence, it drives better behavior.
Yeah, exactly. Because we've got, that's why we started our community events called Cup of Tea. And, you know, we're doing one soon, actually. You're doing a breath work for us. Thank you so much.
That's
we're
good.
very, very excited, because I've done meditation and mindfulness, but I haven't done like a whole breath work session yet. So I'm very excited.
Cool.
And we're also talking about, you know, stress and why we experience stress. I think the why to me is very interesting, because then it allows me, it's allowed me to realize then like the self-soothing and why that supports me. And so, I'm really excited to kind of build this community and practice well-being together. I think it'll be really special. Yeah,
pretty awesome. Last one, from a performance enhancement perspective, because really that's why I got into what I do. And in doing so, I tend to work with all sorts of life. But I don't look at performance as in win the competition performance. I look at it as, who are you and who do you want to be, and how can we maximize that? Looking at those that professionally want to get better in their relationships, there's a performance that you want to improve. How can they use, maybe it's Dala or other, you know, mechanisms psychologically to enhance their performance and use them as tools to identify when they're doing well and what they're doing well, and I guess to support them when they feel like they aren't achieving what they want to achieve from a performance perspective, no matter their role.
Yeah, I think, you know, one thing that Dala can do, but, you know, you can do without, you know, these apps and things, is checking in with yourself daily. Like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Having that kind of close connection with yourself, and then being able to process that, because I think understanding then how you feel, what you need, how things are changing as well, because we're not, you know, our needs change as well, you know, they're evolving in our life. So being able to be in tune with that kind of inner voice and what you need, and going from there, you know, I think for me, like understanding more about, you know, well-being tools, and that I have access to things like exercise, that, you know, therapy or journaling or going out to, you know, nature walks and going to the beach, like all of that is so important for my mental health. And it's not just when I need it, but it's there all the time, and that's important to me. You know, that feeling of safety, and also, you know, sleep. My gosh, how important is sleep?
You do a whole nother
you know,
podcast.
exactly. And looking at yourself like holistically, and looking at your daily habits to support you, and just checking in with yourself, I think, is sort of the first step, I would say, to figuring out what you then need.
Makes so much sense, and it does sound so simple, but it is a challenge.
Yeah,
it really is a challenge. You know, it's whether it's sitting down and doing, you know, journaling, like what role do I want to fulfill, and how do I rate my performance, and then why do I feel a need to meet a certain criteria? if there's that.
So that performance aspect is definitely understanding what it means. So there's something powerful actually that I learned recently, which is, when you're experiencing maybe just say an overwhelming emotion, you're in a fight, or you're, maybe it's a performance struggle or something, kind of ask yourself, what meaning have I assigned this? And I have felt like that to me has been so profound. And I've used that so many times. And you kind of realize that, wow, okay, with maybe it's my performance, if I don't do well, the meaning I've assigned to that might be that, well, I'm not good enough. I'm no good and I'm not safe. You can keep asking yourself the why, like, why do you feel this way? What do you think it means? What do you think that means? And you can sort of narrow into it. And I think those answers are really key then to start doing the work. And then how can you support yourself?
And that's such an important component.
Yeah.
Doing the work, you can't just idea it and sit there.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like the education bit, but then the doing is, and I think also like this takes time, this journey, like you might think, oh my gosh, I'm doing so well. And then you have a setback and you think, what happened? Like I haven't made any change, I'm back to where I started, but no, like it's not linear. We're going to have our bad days. Things are going to happen. We might not be sleeping. Our, stress container can be really narrow and it starts overflowing and you see all of these, we start feeling overwhelmed and things don't go our way. But it's just, it's just the journey really, I think. And being patient and kind and compassionate is really important through that, I think.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. I think that's a really strong note to finish on.
Yeah.
Really good. And I think my favorite thing about this is the tangibility of going and seeing a psychologist or having a therapist and creating that time, that space, having the resources available. Most people don't. And in what you guys are working on, what you're creating, what you're bringing to the forefront, it's just going to give people a few more tools.
Exactly.
And the lens with which they approach it can be anything from, hey, I'm not feeling great. Or it can be, hey, I'm doing well, I want to do better.
Exactly.
And that's both have their place and both are necessary. But I'm really impressed with it. I'm really excited by it. And I'm really excited by that. I think the realness behind it, for lack of a better term, of, as you're saying, it's a human-to-human thing ultimately. It's going to provide a backbone of support to move us in the direction we want to head. So we've got our cup of tea event. What is that? The first weekend of March?
Yes, 1st of March, 9 a.m.
On the Saturday. Yeah. And so that'll be over here at SOF. So if you are listening to this and in Brisbane or Southeast Queensland, by all means, come along. It'll be one of many that I'm sure we do together. But yeah, I think at the very least, super excited for what you guys are doing. How can everybody see Darla, see what work you guys are doing and see the progress until the product's live?
Yeah, so we'll actually be on the App Store on March 1st. Very exciting.
Wow. So
Darla Health. Yeah, so we sort of had a sort of beta kind of close group testing, but now we're like, you know what? Let's launch it. So very exciting. And so that's Darla Health. You can also find us on socials. That's hello.darla and our website is hellodarla.com. So
amazing.
Yeah, check us out.
Super exciting. Cool. All right. Well, hopefully everybody listening does. I recommend you do. As I said, I've already interacted with the app and the team that have been working on this are some of the very best in the country, if not the world, and including yourself. So thank you for all the wonderful work you guys are doing and thank you so much for your time today.
You're too kind. Thank you so much.
No problems.